Long ago, in a world shaped by the rule of kings and the unseen hand of the gods, there was a city called Sidon. The land was drenched in light, its fields bursting with purple flowers that danced in the relentless breeze. To the people of Sidon, the sea was not just water. It was sacred, a living mirror of divine power. Vast, endless, unpredictable, it was both a blessing and a threat. This was the backdrop into which Jezebel was born, a child destined not for a quiet life, but for a throne written in fire. Jezebel's father, King Baal, ruled Sidon and Tyre with an iron hand. He was both priest and monarch, feared by his enemies and obeyed by his people. His court was a place of ambition, intrigue, and ruthless politics. In such an environment, Jezebel was never meant to be ordinary. She was the daughter of a king, but from the beginning, her path was far more dangerous and far more extraordinary than that of other royal daughters. While other young women of her time were raised to become gentle wives, careful diplomats, or beautiful ornaments of the palace, Jezebel was shaped into something else entirely. She was molded to rule. Her tutors taught her not just how to speak with grace, but how to speak with authority. She learned how to watch men's eyes and measure their fears. She was trained to read silences, to turn doubt into leverage, to turn kindness into obedience. Jezebel discovered early that power was not only in armies or crowns, it was in perception. If people believed you to be unshakable, then you were. If they feared to cross you, then you had already won. This understanding became the foundation of her life. From a young age, Jezebel mastered the dangerous art of manipulation. She learned that men could be moved by flattery, broken by humiliation, and controlled by promises. She studied alliances, watched betrayals unfold, and understood that loyalty was rarely given freely. It had to be secured by force or by cleverness. Jezebel was not playing the game of power. She was rewriting it. As she grew into womanhood, her beauty became as formidable as her mind. Her striking presence drew suitors from noble houses and foreign courts. Yet Jezebel was not interested in love or charm. Marriage to her was a political tool, a stepping stone to her greater vision. If she was to marry, it would be to strengthen her grasp on power. Her heart did not belong to romance. It belonged to destiny. In those years, whispers began to reach Sidon. Whispers of the kingdom of Israel. Israel, a land divided in faith and fractured in loyalty, was ruled by King Ahab. Though he had inherited the throne from his father, his reign was marked by weakness. Ahab was not without influence, but he lacked the steel of a true monarch. His reign was troubled, his people restless, his leadership uncertain. To Jezebel, this was no distant rumor. It was opportunity. Ahab was searching for an alliance, a queen who could fortify his rule. Jezebel saw at once what others could not. This was her chance to extend her reach beyond Sidon, beyond the Phoenician coast, into the heart of Israel. She did not see Ahab as a king to admire. She saw him as a man to use. When the proposal came, Jezebel did not hesitate. She accepted, not out of affection, but out of calculation. She left her homeland, the purple flowers of Sidon and the sea that had raised her, and set her eyes on Israel. The journey itself felt like prophecy. Her ship carved through the waters, sails billowing under skies that seemed to push her forward. She was not leaving home. She was leaving one stage of her life for another. Sidon had raised her. Israel would be hers. When Jezebel arrived in Israel, the people were struck by her presence. She was foreign, regal, and breathtaking. But her power was not in her beauty alone. It was in her aura. Her gaze was steady, her words sharp, her bearing unshakable. She was not simply a queen arriving to marry a king. She was a storm entering Israel's gates. Ahab, weak and pliable, quickly became a shadow beside her brilliance. Though he wore the crown, Jezebel held the reins. Her intelligence, her cunning, Her decisiveness filled the gap left by his hesitation. She replaced his advisors with her own loyalists, silenced voices of dissent, and bent the court to her will. The palace, once Israel's, became Jezebel's. But Jezebel's ambition reached beyond politics. She had not come merely to guide Ahab's hand. She had come to reshape the very soul of Israel. From the moment she set foot in the land, Jezebel carried with her the worship of Baal, the Phoenician god of fertility, storms, and rain. In Israel, the people had long worshipped Yahweh, the God who had brought their fathers out of Egypt, who had parted seas and spoken through prophets. Jezebel saw no sanctity in Yahweh. She saw only a rival. She ordered altars to Baal raised in the land. She built temples and filled them with priests loyal to her gods. Rituals of worship foreign to Israel began to spread openly, and those who opposed her, those who clung to Yahweh, were silenced, some by intimidation, others by execution. Jezebel's rule was marked by fear, and through fear she reigned. To the people of Israel, it became clear that Ahab was king only in name. Jezebel was the true power on the throne, yet her dominance brought resistance. Israel was not easily turned. Its faith, though shaken, still held firm in the hearts of many. Prophets of Yahweh rose against her, speaking out boldly against the corruption that filled the land. And at the forefront of this resistance stood one man whose name would become her greatest burden: Elijah. Elijah was unlike others. He was not afraid of Jezebel, not swayed by her threats. He spoke with the authority of God himself. He declared drought upon the land, and the skies obeyed. He called down fire from heaven, and the flames consumed the sacrifices. Each miracle was a strike against Jezebel's authority, each word a wound to her pride. Jezebel raged. Her fury was unmatched. She sent word to Elijah, swearing by her gods that within a day he would be dead. So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Her threat was sharp, her resolve absolute. Yet Elijah lived. He fled into the wilderness, yes, but he was not destroyed. God sustained him, renewed him, and sent him back with greater power than before. Jezebel had declared war not only against a prophet, but against the God of Israel himself. Still, Jezebel did not relent. She doubled down. She raised the temple of Baal in Samaria, filled her court with pagan priests, and sought to root out every last prophet of Yahweh. To her, this was not only politics, this was conquest of the spirit. But the stage was now set for a confrontation that would define her reign. The conflict between Jezebel's gods and the God of Israel would rise to its climax on the heights of Mount Carmel. There, in front of the nation, the question would be asked, who is the true God? And Jezebel, though absent from that mountain, would soon feel the weight of its answer. The winds over Israel began to shift after Jezebel had cemented her rule. Her temples to Baal stood tall, her priests thrived, and her influence touched every corner of the kingdom. Yet beneath the surface, opposition burned like an unquenchable fire. The prophets of Yahweh, though hunted and threatened, refused to bow. Their voices, though few, carried power, and their faith was stronger than her fear. At the heart of this defiance was Elijah. His courage and miracles stirred the people, reminding them that the God of Israel was no myth. On Mount Carmel, the contest was declared. It was here that Jezebel's empire of faith would face its greatest challenge. Before the eyes of the nation, the prophets of Baal cried out to their God. They shouted, danced, even cut themselves, but Baal was silent. Hours passed. Still, nothing. Then Elijah stepped forward, his voice steady. He rebuilt the altar of Yahweh, drenched the sacrifice with water, and prayed. In an instant, fire fell from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the stones, the water, everything. The people fell to the ground in awe, declaring, "The Lord he is God. The prophets of Baal were slaughtered that day. Jezebel's power had been humiliated before the nation. But humiliation did not bring repentance. Instead, it ignited her fury. Jezebel swore vengeance, promising that Elijah would die just as her prophets had. Yet Elijah was not defeated. He fled for a time, weary and afraid, but God strengthened him in the wilderness. He returned, more determined than ever, and continued to confront the corruption that Jezebel had unleashed. His survival became proof to Israel that Jezebel's threats were empty before the power of Yahweh. Still, Jezebel did not relent. She tightened her grip on Israel, silencing dissent wherever it rose. Her reign became a reign of blood. Prophets of Yahweh were hunted, political opponents destroyed, and fear became the air the people breathed. She ruled with an iron fist, and the shadow of her power stretched across the land. But even the strongest shadow cannot outlast the light. Jezebel's arrogance blinded her to a truth that no ruler could escape. Kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall. Time passed. Ahab, her husband, was killed in battle, and Jezebel's influence wavered. Yet she clung to power through her sons, determined that the house of Ahab would endure. But a prophecy had already been spoken, a prophecy that her line would be destroyed and that dogs would devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The words of Elijah echoed like thunder across the years. Jezebel had mocked them once. Now they loomed over her like a storm cloud ready to break. Her downfall came through Jehu, a commander in Israel's army. Once a servant of Ahab, Jehu was chosen by God to bring judgment upon Jezebel and her house. He was anointed to overthrow the dynasty, to wipe out the corruption that had consumed Israel. His rise was swift, his mission clear. As Jehu rode into Jezreel, Jezebel knew the end had come. Yet, true to her nature, she refused to cower. She adorned herself in royal robes, painted her face, and positioned herself at the palace window. Even in the face of death, Jezebel chose defiance. From above, she looked down at Jehu and his men. Her words were sharp, taunting, an attempt to pierce his resolve. But Jehu was unmoved. He shouted to her attendants, "Who is on my side?" And in that moment, Jezebel's own servants turned against her. They seized her and hurled her from the window. Jezebel's body struck the ground, broken in the streets she once ruled. Blood splattered the walls, and the queen who had once commanded kings and armies was reduced to a lifeless corpse. Jehu's horse trampled her remains, a grim symbol of how far she had fallen. But her story did not end there. When soldiers came to bury her, they found almost nothing left. Dogs had devoured her flesh, leaving only her skull, her hands, and her feet. The prophecy had been fulfilled with chilling accuracy. The dogs will eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Jezebel's reign of fear, her empire of idolatry, her ruthless ambition, all of it crumbled in that moment. She had built her legacy on manipulation, violence, and defiance against God. In the end, that very defiance became her undoing. Yet her death was more than just the fall of a queen. It was a turning point for Israel. Jehu purged the land of Baal's worship. Temples were torn down, priests executed, and the people began to turn back to Yahweh. Jezebel's empire of idols collapsed as quickly as it had been built. Still, the scars of her rule remained. Israel had paid dearly for her ambition. Years of spiritual corruption, division, and bloodshed could not be erased overnight. Jezebel, Yes name, became a symbol, a warning of what happens when pride and power eclipse reverence for God. Jezebel had believed herself invincible. She thought she could bend nations to her will, silence prophets, and replace the faith of Israel with the gods of Sidon. But in the end, she discovered the truth that all rulers must face. No throne stands forever. No power escapes judgment. Jezebel's story is not just history. It is a lesson. A lesson that ambition without humility leads to ruin. A lesson that those who defy God cannot escape the weight of His justice. A lesson that kingdoms built on fear will collapse, but those built on truth will endure. And so, Jezebel's name endures not as a queen to be admired, but as a warning etched into time. She rose like a storm, burned like fire, and fell like ash. Her life reminds us that unchecked power leads only to destruction, and that no one, not even the most powerful, is beyond accountability. If you listened closely to her story, you will see that Jezebel was not merely a woman of her time. She was a force of nature, a storm that swept across Israel. But storms always pass, and when they do, the sky clears, the light returns, and the world remembers not the power of the storm, but the ruin it left behind. Jezebel thought she could redefine Israel. Instead, she became a cautionary tale, a name spoken through centuries as the embodiment of pride, corruption, and downfall. Her end was brutal, her legacy bitter, but her story remains alive. A story that warns us, a story that teaches us, and a story that will echo as long as history is told. If this story stirred you, take a breath with me. Now tap subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with our growing community as we bring Scripture to life each week. Tell us in the comments, what struck you most about Jezebel's story? Her rise, her defiance, or her fall? Your insight helps shape the next episodes, and we read every response. Thank you for spending these minutes with us. Until we meet again, keep seeking truth, walking in faith, and guarding your heart. This is Heavenly Tales HQ, where the Word becomes a living story. Like, share, and invite a friend who needs this today. See you in the next one.